Well, it is a pleasure to be with you here this morning at this Edith Stein conference. And my paper today will really be examining in finite and eternal being, which is really her culminating work, and then also Potency and Act, which was a work she wrote in an effort to get at a professorship at a German school. I believe that Heidegger was working at the time, and others. So it's kind of heady, kind of philosophical, but I'll try to make it entertaining as possible with some props and things. I'd like to begin with a scripture verse from the book of Revelation, chapter 3, verse 20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into her and eat with her, and she with me. For Edith Stein, human vocation is comprised of a call and a response. The call is issued from the divine, and the human response is enabled by divine assistance. Human vocation is not simply a matter concerning choice of occupation, but rather concerns the ultimate gestalt, or shape, of one's life. She writes the following to a former student of hers, Rose Magold, in a letter dated August 30th, 1931, quote, "The question of vocation cannot be solved merely through self-examination, plus a scrutiny of the various possibilities. One must pray for the answer. You know that, and in many cases it must be sought by way of obedience. I have given the same advice several times, and those involved have arrived at peace and clarity by following it." End quote. Stein argues that to be shaped within demands pliability at the sway of sources from without. As will be further demonstrated, human vocation is a matter of intersubjective existence, a living in community that awakens one to possibility and development. To awaken from vocational slumber is to heed the personal divine summons to travel eastward toward the sun, S-O-N, of glory. This paper will trace the contours of Stein's understanding of universal human vocation. First, an analysis will be made of the Aristotelian and Thomistic, that's Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, potency act hermeneutic as developed by Stein. And just to kind of give you a picture, these are the key categories Stein is working with are act, and then potency, and the interaction between the two. So, according to Aristotle, and Aquinas takes this up, act is prior to potency, and then especially to, you could say, actualized being. So all being can be interpreted according to this hermeneutic of act and potency. Act, which actualizes potency into actual being. So we're going to try to parse this out here. So the relationship between potency and act serves as the linchpin of Stein's entire philosophical project, which attempts to answer the question of being through a synthesis of Thomistic Sacra Doctrina, sacred doctrine, and Husserlian phenomenological realism. Second, an inventory will be taken of the components of what Stein calls intersubjectivity. For Stein, personal vocation is not a matter of turning inward in solipsistic inquiry, but rather one of turning outward and opening to the agency of the other. Third and finally, the notion and function of grace in Stein's vision will be assessed in presenting a teleological vision wherein finite being stretches toward infinite being. Stein frames the question of human vocation as an integral dimension of the question of being itself. By proceeding according to these three systematic checkpoints of Stein's work, a concentrated appraisal will be submitted that will contribute to comprehending the notion of human vocation. In addition, this sketch will also aid in understanding the way in which Stein herself fulfilled a definite sense of vocation in her own life. Edith Stein embarks on her philosophical project, confident that she draws from the immutable riches of philosophia perennis, or perennial philosophy, meaning that above and beyond the limitations of historical epochs and peoples, there is something in which all those share who honestly search for truth. As it was with her forebearers, so it remains for Stein. The question of being lies at the core of philosophical inquiry. Stein's lifelong philosophical project is marked by the struggle to understand as fully as possible the meaning and constitution of being, as the German word sein. She finds Aristotle to be a helpful guide as he broaches the question within the heart of his metaphysics. Stein suggests that her culminating work, Finite and Eternal Being, may have grown out of this question as out of a living seed. Likewise, Stein finds Aristotle's hermeneutic for being, namely potency and act, as the primary way to understand the mystery of being. As human beings, we are able to fathom the being of things as a perpetual process of becoming on all levels of existence. Biologically speaking, we know that the cellular processes of animal species rely on the continuous citric acid cycle for the production of energy. Likewise, we know that the life of plant species relies on the photosynthetic process for the production of energy and for growth, development, and reproduction. In these fundamental processes of energy production, organisms exhibit a host of potentialities that become actualized. Underlying such biological processes are the potent molecular polarities that make possible the series of chemical reactions which produce energy from the organism and allow it to attain other possibilities of its being. For example, movement, mating, and nurturing its offspring. Molecular polarities, the atomic theory, where you have the positive protons and then negative electrons, and just the interaction of electrons, how new molecules are formed and disassociate and form. So there's this variety of potency acts at work in life, undeniably so. So in contemplating the question of being according to the dialectic potency act, one is led to the conclusion that there must be a pure and absolute actuality that is prior to all potentiality. For we observe that nothing that is potential becomes actual on its own accord, but rather relies on an anterior actuality to stir its potentiality into actuality.